Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine.
Back in March 1972, I was an independent student studying alone in the small village called Ibuzor that was in the then Midwest state of Nigeria. In the mornings and afternoons, I studied in our house that was behind the small hospital in Ibuzor. In the late afternoons, I studied alone at Sacred Heart Primary School, Ibuzor. That school was a short distance from the town's market. I also conducted independent research at the science fair level, and I did so from mid-1970 at Venn Road, Onitsha, to late 1973 in Ibuzor, Asaba, and Onitsha, Nigeria. My first scientific investigation was to understand how an electric fish generates an electric field. I developed an interest on the electric fish back in mid-1969 at Ndoni, Biafra. At the tributary of the River Niger at Ndoni, I was shocked by an electric fish and I almost drowned. Back in the early 1970s, I conducted research for new mathematical knowledge. My mathematical research was a quest for new Pythagorean triples that consisted of 3 positive integers, a, b, c, such that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. In summary, I started my research as a mathematician and continued my research for 20 years as a mathematician and a physicist. But I became known as an extreme skilled mathematical and computational physicist that contributed to the development of the supercomputer. My supercomputer is a new internet de facto. Back in the early 1970s and in Nigeria, my research libraries were the Onitsha Central Library that was in GRA, the local acronym for Government Reserved Area, Onitsha, the British Council Library in Enugu, and the East Central State Library, also in Enugu. As a teenager in Nigeria, I was 2 decades away from the frontier of knowledge of the massively parallel supercomputer that cost the budget of a small nation. For that reason, my early research was actually a science fair project. My research project on the electric fish was why the science column of a mid-1972 issue of the Daily Times of Nigeria had an entry that was credited to Philip Emeagwali, Christ the King College, Onitsha, East Central State, Nigeria. That was my first known printed use of the word Emeagwali in any newspaper. Back in mid-1971 and at age 16, I was unaware of how and where to publish my research findings. For that reason, I submitted my mathematical rediscoveries on number theory to the Reader's Digest and to Drum magazine. Drum is a black lifestyle magazine and one of Africa's leading magazines. Drum magazine was to post-colonial Africans what Ebony magazine is to African Americans. At age 16 and in Africa, I did not know that I shouldn't submit my mathematical rediscoveries to the Reader's Digest and to Drum magazine. Fast forward a quarter of a century to the United States. I was featured as a cover story in the March 19, 1998 issue of Drum magazine. Drum magazine was published in Johannesburg, South Africa. Drum magazine introduced me to black South Africans. That Drum magazine story was titled Super Brain of Africa. The heart of those articles written about Philip Emeagwali was that I discovered the supercomputer hopefuls' most well-guarded secret, namely how to parallel process and how to use to solve grand challenge problems across a new internet that is defined and outlined by millions upon millions of commodity off-the-shelf processors. Yet, the paradigm shift for the field of supercomputing isn't recording the fastest calculations. The heart of supercomputing is solving the grand challenge problems of computer science. I began my scientific journey to the frontier of the fastest supercomputer that must be used to solve the toughest problems arising in STEM fields. I began my technological journey with the slowest analog computer called a slide rule that I purchased in June 1970 in Onitsha, Nigeria. I began that journey as a tiny entry of the name Philip Emeagwali in the Daily Times of Nigeria of mid-1972. I bought my first analog computer for the price of £1 Nigerian. That was 1 month's wage back in 1970. I bought that manual computer from a bookstore that was near Zix Roundabout and that was near Dennis Memorial Grammar School, Onitsha, East Central State, Nigeria. 3 years after I purchased my manual computer, I received a scholarship letter from Oregon, United States, that was dated September 10, 1973.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.